Hey guys, welcome to an all-new bonus round here on GameTrailers.com. I'm Jeff Keighley, and we're a little more casual today. We've got couches, but an awesome panel to talk about all the latest in the gaming business. We've got Anthony Carboni joining us. Anthony, great to see you.
Thanks for having me.
Also, Shane Satterfield, you familiar to many GT viewers over the years. Shane, great to have you back. You're working on a new site that's going to be coming out pretty soon, right?
I am, yeah. The site's coming out in November, so follow me on Twitter and get all the information.
That's right, Dinfire on Twitter. And finally, also returning to Game Trailers, the annoyed gamer, Marcus Beer. It's a reunion. Marcus, great to have you back.
I know, it's a mega bonus round.
I was going to say, this is like bringing all the old guard back. Well, guys, it's great to have you here. We're going to talk about a bunch of stuff this month, but we're going to start with Tokyo Game Show. None of us were there, but we watched the coverage online. And, you know, Tokyo Game Show used to be a massive show. Shane and I have a lot of memories from going over there for Game Trailers, I don't know, probably 7, 8 years ago, and all the amazing things that happened kind of around the launch of like PlayStation 3 and whatnot. I haven't been to TGS in a few years. Haven't been a lot of great announcements. I actually thought this TGS seemed to have a little bit more heat on it than normal. Anthony, was there anything that stood out to you from TGS this year?
Yeah, man, definitely the Silent Hills trailer.
Uh-huh.
I've been waiting for Silent Hills since PT came out.
Right.
Looks so good.
Yeah.
Looks so good.
Absolutely.
Just the way that they are nailing sort of the feeling like of one of the most underrated, like the underrated Silent Hill game I thought was The Room, which I really love, but it was this weird departure, right? But I love that Silent Hills, everything we've seen so far is kind of relegated to this one house, this one hallway, feels very cramped. You feel very trapped in there with something. This trailer just kind of kept giving that impression. It looks so good. It looks so good visually. Never have you seen leeches crawl out of a woman's mouth.
No, and the fact
looks
that
so good.
Kojima is that twisted with where he's taking it. I mean, who knows when it's coming out, but it definitely looks pretty big. And he actually had a pretty amazing TGS because not only talked a little bit more about Silent Hills, but then there was a ton of Metal Gear Solid 5 stuff that came out. I mean, the quiet gameplay, but the trailer, and I mean, that game, I think everyone keeps wondering where it's at in development. Online people are saying, oh, it's nearing completion. Shane, what's your take on kind of the Phantom Pain? Obviously announced it a few years ago at VGAs, and it's been like little drips of information.
Like you said, announced it a few years ago at VGAs. Well, I mean, first of all, I think the gameplay looks amazing. I mean, I think you need a suspension of disbelief like you need with a lot of Kojima games, and particularly Metal Gear. A lot of the stuff doesn't make much sense if you really think about it logically. Then, kind of the big reveal was the new character, Quiet. Yeah. And I feel like maybe that character is a little tone deaf with what's going on in the industry right now, at least in the West. A lot of the big discussion these days is kind of around the gratuitous sort of use of women in video games.
But they threw a puppy in there too to give it out, so everything's fine.
I think in some ways it's it's so much of it, as you said, it's like a suspension of disbelief. Because even like at Gamescom when he showed the box, you put the Xbox box on your Snake's head and stuff like that. I mean, it just feels like the kind of thing that
you just kind of got to let it go. And I mean, honestly, his games have been like that for a long time. I feel like there's a contingency of people who have tried to take things seriously, and even them at this point have probably given up. I don't feel like you really can do that with his games, but the gameplay in the game looks incredible. I mean, the way that he does kind of mess with all those elements that he's throwing in there, at least the vertical slice we saw at Tokyo Game Show was impressive. Who knows how the game ultimately kind of plays out, because, Ground Zeroes, I felt like, I wasn't overly impressed with Ground Zeroes, and once you see something where you're actually playing it, it kind of gives you a better idea of what the game's going to be like. I mean, we saw that with Destiny. It's like, oh, we played the alpha, we played the beta, but the final game's going to be a lot different than that, right? Well, not really. It really wasn't. So I do kind of have concerns that what they're showing us is just like, hey, we're going to put everything in this little space and kind of blow people away, but when you play the actual game, maybe it's not quite as dense. But auspicious, I would say, the demo that they showed at Tokyo Game Show, it definitely is encouraging and maybe more excited for the game, which is kind of the whole point.
Right, exactly. And I feel like as they reveal more for that game, it feels like there's more depth. And there are things along the way where, remember even at Gamescom, some people were saying, well, it looks like Kiefer Sutherland's voice isn't in it that much, and Kojima said, well, it's like he's not going to talk that much. We're like, well, then how much story is going to be there? It's going to be interesting to see how that all kind of ties together with an open world, and then, as you said, the narrative that people expect from Kojima. And sometimes they say it's too long, but it's like that's what people want, is that story.
Well, my fear is that it also turns into a Grand Theft Auto type game where, because you have this open world, you kind of have to have these spawn points for missions. And Grand Theft Auto kind of turns into this loop where It's go here, talk to this guy, cutscene happens in the room, go do this, you go do it, you come back to watch another cutscene. And so my fear is that Metal Gear turns into something like that, which, you know, I feel like fans probably wouldn't be too happy about that based upon how the stories have been told in the games prior. But based upon the gameplay, which for me personally has always been something that's kind of turned me off to Metal Gear, and I've always been a gameplay first guy. It's encouraging to see so much focus placed on what you're actually doing when you're interacting with the game versus just the story part of it. So
absolutely,
I'm just going to run around with a puppy, attaching as many things as possible
with an
to
eye
balloons.
patch.
With an eye patch, attaching as many things as I can to balloons, and that's going to be my Metal
there.
Gear experience.
Well, then there was the one shot too where he's like running through the woods and he like scopes out and Quiet's like sniping on a bank and she's like sitting there with her legs like spread open, like. Again, it's almost like a cultural thing. Maybe he doesn't really understand what's going on in the gaming industry in the West right now, but it was a little disconcerting, I think, based upon kind of the things that have been happening.
The tone of conversation. Marcus, you've been quiet so far.
I'm still replaying the Quiet trailer in my head, to be honest with you. And look, I mean, I'm not renowned for being the most PC guy around, even though I am a PC gamer. But yeah, Quiet, it smacks of ridiculousness. I mean, it's Benny Hill level ridiculousness.
It is pretty silly.
I mean, you know, going on a mission, sniping. Okay, so assless chaps and a thong it is then. And I mean, it is kind of, it is a cultural thing, I think. It's definitely more of a Japanese thing.
It's partially cultural, but don't you also get the feeling like at this point, people like Kojima and people like Suda are, at this point, they're doing that on purpose now.
They just
flipping the middle finger to the industry.
Yeah, they're kind of twisting a little. They're kind of twisting the knife a little bit for reaction.
I think it's almost becoming sort of a bit of a parody, but it's sort of like that's I think almost it's like you take it to such an extreme.
Well, it's just silly.
I think
who goes to war in a bra? I mean, it's not functional. It makes no sense. And again, you have to suspend.
But who sneaks around in a cardboard box, right?
Unless it's a specially made war bra.
Who hooks enemies up to hot air balloons?
Exactly. I mean, for me, this is probably the most interesting Metal Gear Solid in a while because it is more open world and it has a bunch of different characters in the core. I loved the open world demo. I loved you can ride your horse, which made me want a new Red Dead Redemption game, by the way. Or you can climb up the wall, and that is great. And I'm just scared that this game will get buried in such a negative landslide because of what's happened with Quiet and what's happened with some of the other things that's come out about the game over the last 6-8 months. I think sometimes you need to say, right, yes, I'm having a bit of fun, but sometimes it needs to be dialed back a little because I'm really interested. I love the fact that he jumps into the big cardboard box and he pops out in the old stealth suit. That level of humor is fantastic. But yeah, some of it is almost like you might as well have Kojima come on stage, appear in the game and go, oh,
well, that's like such a great point too, because that feeling of difference, like the things that we're worried about like the open world, it also feels like they know that this is such a great jumping on point for people who have not been Metal Gear fans, for a new generation of gamers who are just getting introduced to this. And you see the same thing in the Final Fantasy 15 trailer from TGS2, where it feels a little bit like a departure. And when you have that opportunity to grab a new audience, to do something that is that tone deaf and immediately turn off potentially that new audience from Go, is like a little dicey. I don't know.
What I would say is that usually Kojima, he gives you the nod. So you know that he's poking fun at something and that he's, kind of doing an irreverence or whatever, but I didn't get that from this. Like, there wasn't that moment where, like, Snake makes this comment about, great battle gear. All it takes is something like that to kind of diffuse it a little bit.
Yeah.
And I feel like they never got that.
And I think what's interesting is, those games, Metal Gear games, have deep, weighty premises to them and, deep messages about, nuclear proliferation and things like that. So it'll be interesting to see sort of how that fits alongside some of these other things which are more fun. And you're right, he seems to be showing a lot of the fun right now, with, as you said, like the goats flying up in the balloons and all that. So it'll be interesting to see how much does that tie into the story, and even in a story where you're not going to hear that much from Snake, talking. It's going to be interesting how that plays out too. So.
To be fair, we, all that video is taken in a context of we don't know what the, what words are being said. I was watching the video with, he was obviously doing a stage demo and people were laughing at certain points. So I'm hoping that there is some language in there that when it translates will be great, fantastic.
Well, you can find those on YouTube, obviously, where people have gone in and translated them. But
go to YouTube. Visit my YouTube site.
On GT.
But I do want to say about Final Fantasy 15 because I've been off Final Fantasy since like 7. I've tried to go back. I tried playing online. I tried, America, I tried. But then this one starts off, and I'm thinking, oh shit, it's One Direction on a road trip. And then they've got big swords. And then it actually looks really cool. I mean, it has the same level of Final Fantasy cheese that you can expect. I mean, it is melodrama of the highest order, but
visually,
I loved it, man.
I am actually interested, and dare I say it, excited.
Yes. Yeah. I'm the same way. I've never been hugely into Final Fantasy. You know, a couple of them have grabbed me here and there, a couple of things in the franchise, but this is just like 4 dudes on a road trip with magic swords. My dad is the king, and I'm tired of his bullshit. Let's get into Dave's car and kill some mammoths. Like, that's rad.
Yeah. It's a coming-of-age story.
Yeah. And it's just like, and the way that they are speaking so much more like normal people than we have seen. Like, Final Fantasy has turned in the last few years into like a big just nonsense exposition fest out of the characters' mouths. Yeah. But to like see these characters get out of a car at sunset and just stretch and be like, man, I am so hungry. Like, my sides ache. Like, we're so far away from the city, I can't get the radio. Like, it's just normal road trip shit with magical swords.
Yeah.
I think it's completely ridiculous.
It's what?
It's so bad.
I think it's
Where's your heart?
Or you think it's too
I'm just going on what they showed of the game. I just think it's completely ridiculous. I feel like everybody...
Like the premise is ridiculous?
The gameplay looks fine. Yeah. Just the whole premise and the setup of it, and like... I feel like it's a case of lowered expectations. People have grown to dislike...
The amnesiac clone soldier in a steampunk world was fine with you.
No, that's what I'm saying. Like, everything is... It's gotten so bad for Final Fantasy that people are to the point where they'll look at this and be like, that's good.
Was there a point, though, where you liked Final Fantasy?
Oh, yeah. Growing up as a kid, I love Final Fantasy.
Yeah.
Like, but see, that's...
They lost you along the way,
Yeah, I think a lot of people would agree with that.
I agree, absolutely, yeah.
I mean...
Because even past, 7, I feel like a lot of people just, like, it's kind of gone off rails.
I mean,
well, it turned into...
I don't know.
The core, there's a core, right? But I remember back, in the day, like, even it was like, there was those launches were huge, right? They were like, those were big,
I loved 8 and 9
games.
as well.
Yeah.
I mean, for me, it was 10 where it kind of started going off the rail. I still enjoyed 10.
I like 10 too, where you're J-pop stars trying to save the world.
Yeah.
That was pretty rad.
I mean, look, I still play them and I enjoy the games, but if we're just talking about the premise of Final Fantasy V, it just seems completely ridiculous to me. And again, it almost feels like it's a little bit of one of those instances of being tone deaf and not realizing what the West... It almost seems like it's made for a younger audience who are into, like you said, like pop stars and like groups like that.
Well, no, I think
which it makes sense because when I was a kid, I loved it. I loved Final Fantasy, and it was all about wizards and warriors and that type of stuff.
And you hit puberty, and you realized there was more to games than Final Fantasy. But I think a lot of you
and that's why they added cars.
Yeah, see,
it's fine now.
It just doesn't make any sense to me.
Well, no, and part of it I think that you bring up is a good point of the Japanese market. What games can they make that are still relatable for the West over here, right?
And that's what I feel like this is. I think they are looking at the West and saying, this is what we think the West wants. They love One Direction, they love boy bands, they love pop stars.
Final Fantasy characters have looked like that since the dawn of time. You can't blame One Direction for the way those characters are dressed in the trailer.
But this
I'm
time,
just talking about the whole,
back at Squall,
the
and then
whole
look
buddy
at these
road.
guys.
It's like they watched a bunch of movies and
Yeah.
were like, people love road trip movies.
People do love road trip movies.
So let's make it a road trip
No,
game.
but the idea of that being kind of a commentary on the culture, I think you're right. It's like a lot of those games are feeling like they're sort of trying, and you could look at
you can't
Dead
blame
Rising,
them.
other games. It's like games that sort of try and sort of
I don't blame them for trying.
Satirize
We're just talking about what was ultimately shown, and that's sort of my take on it. So.
Right, and that's only a slice of the game. So we'll see.
It is.
We'll see when we get there. Well, we get a demo next year apparently. Right?
Well, the other thing too, what came out, I think it was an interview with Eurogamer, is that Tabata-san said that they are simplifying the game to make it more palatable to casuals. And essentially what you can do is hold one button for combat.
Wow, okay.
And it just intrinsically auto-plays through the game. Yeah.
Wow.
And
but coming from a game series that comes from menu-based roots.
Right.
That sort of makes sense to me, as opposed to like really heavy timing-based combat.
But I wonder,
I
wonder if that's
that's the other thing too. It looks like a typical action.
Well, that's
game.
why I wonder how much of it is really like hold the button and go through, or it's more like now it's like Batman or something where it's like it's real-time combat. It's like It would be amazing if it literally was just hold
Based upon that interview, it sounded pretty much like you could hold a button and pretty much work your way through it.
It looked to me like they were going head-to-head with Dragon Age.
Right.
For that style of game, but with a Japanese perspective on it. Which, you know, I mean, they need to sell the units. We know Square Enix, they're always in trouble. They could sell a 5 million unit game and still make a loss. God bless them. But, you know, so they need to make that profit. They know it's going to sell to the hardcore, but they need to expand because lots and lots of people are getting turned off by, you know, what turned me off Final Fantasy? When the actual cutscene, the amount of cutscenes on the disc was longer than the game I played. That's when I was done, and they went, you know, they went further down that rabbit hole, and now they've started to pull back, which is great. And you know, who knows? It might actually bring somebody like me back to the franchise, which again is the scary times for the games industry.
All right, well, we will find out when these games hopefully ship in the next couple of years, and we'll see. I mean, out of all the games at TGS, was there one that you guys really feel like is something that you really want to play? I mean, is it 15?
15 was up there, but it was definitely Silent Hills. Definitely for me, Silent
Bloodborne? Anyone excited about that?
Yeah, definitely Bloodborne.
I'm actually shocked at how soon that's coming, because I mean, that's February.
It's actually the day after my birthday, so it's like
great birthday present. But that's a game that I think, when Sony announced it at E3 and it sort of leaked ahead of time, I think people assumed it was going to be multiple years. And the fact that that's coming out in early February around the world was surprising.
It looks really good.
Yeah.
I'm looking forward to the new 3DS with a nub.
Yeah.
Oh, the nub.
No.
It's going to be great.
It's such a terrible idea to add the nub now.
Yeah, it splits the user
base.
I was being sarcastic.
Oh, thank God.
I was being sarcastic.
Oh, thank God.
I mean, it's like, oh, look, I'm doing something complex in a game, and again, no, I have to touch
It's fascinating to me, too, that would, announce that in, like, the biggest game, for 3DS, Smash, is, coming out here in a couple weeks, and it's like, be great if that came out at the same time or something, and it's like, now...
You're splitting your user base as well. The 3DS has become the most confusing platform I have ever
so many different
seen.
versions, yeah.
There's too many versions, and now the one thing you could always say is, like, they play the same games.
Right.
Until now.
Yeah.
Because now there are games that are exclusive that only make use of the new 3DS. It's funny how they've like branded the word new.
We'll see how many of those aren't made by Nintendo themselves.
Yeah, exactly.
And you know whose fault that is? Apple's. They've looked at Apple and said, look what these buggers can do with the iPhone every year, so that's what we're going to do with the 3DS.
Well, even when they did the XL, like, that was the idea of, like, do a bigger screen. You're right, there's an audience that will keep buying that. But we haven't heard about new 2DS models. Oh, actually, I saw there's going to be a clear version of the 2DS.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. They'll keep putting out colors.
Ready for that?
Sorry, let me just get my phone and get on GameStop and order that
one thing about TGS, though, before we go, is that it's good to see TGS be relevant again.
Yeah.
Because the last time I went was 2012.
I agree.
And literally, when we left that show, I was like, we'll never come back here again until something changes drastically. Because there was just no reason to go.
Exactly.
And so to see this year, the Japanese developers and publishers actually keeping something for their show for the first time in a while is really good.
Yeah.
And in my opinion, the Japanese market needs to be strong for games to be strong across the globe. And so it's really encouraging to see TGS kind of turn a corner a little bit.
I agree with that. All right, we'll be back with more bonus round next time right here on GT.